Hey everybody, and welcome to the Jump Ball Podcast. I'm your host Mo Dakio, and today my guest is Danny Marang. He's the host of Blazers Outsiders pregame and postgame show on NBC Northwest, as well as NBA analyst on the podcast Blazers Edge. We're going to talk Blazers, as you can guess, and other random NBA topics as we get into it. So, you ready to tip it off? Danny, how you doing?
Not too bad, buddy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Just rolling along, ready to. I mean, we're so close to the playoffs, man.
Oh, is that what that is? I don't. As a resident Blazers guy, I no longer care about those.
You did a few days ago.
Yeah, that's I think that's even more depressing, is that I did care a few days ago, and now it's like, well, all right. Would you rather be the Lakers right now, or would you rather be the Blazers? And that's, I think, kind of paints the entire picture of just how crappy things are right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit rough. We're obviously talking about the Jusuf Nurkic injury. If you haven't heard about it, I highly recommend you not go watch the video.
Do not Google it. It is one of the worst you will ever see.
You don't need to see it. Just take our word for it. He had a compound fracture of his tibia and fibula, I believe.
Yep.
Had surgery. I think it was today, right? And
yeah, yesterday morning he had successful surgery. So he spent the night in the hospital after the injury. Next morning, went through surgery, successful. No ligament, muscle, any other damage, which is the first step. Now it's got the rod and plate in there, and you're hoping that, please God, no infections. Like that's the level that we're at now.
Right. But I mean, this is probably about as good a news as we could have had at this point. Yep. With the injury, in terms of him coming back and everything at some point. It's more similar to the Paul George injury, so there's no real true damage, just a clean break, so to speak. But it was not fun watching that live.
No, it was awful. Blazers in the thick of it, fighting for a 3 seed, playing against a fun, energetic Brooklyn team. Jusuf Nurkic is having the second or third best game of his career in the midst of his best single season as a player in the NBA. Fantastic two-way player. He is, or was. We'll just say he is the best two-way player on the Blazers right now. And to see him go down the way he did, not just how gruesome the injury was, but just you knew immediately. There's no when you see a guy clutches his knee, oh, maybe it's just a little something. You know what I mean? Like CJ McCollum, he went down a week ago, right. Clutches his knee, and he had that look like, well, it could be bad, but it's not. It wasn't an immediate, like it wasn't a Paul George, or we were talking about beforehand, the Sean Livingston or a Garbajosa, where you're just like, so you in that moment that his season and potentially his career could have just as quickly as his leg snap be over.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things. Like I watched it live, and when I saw it, I was like, that doesn't look right. Oh no, and then I knew something was wrong when you saw how quickly all the players ran away.
Yeah, I mean, that's your first signal. That's the oh no, oh God, what's happening? And the baseline camera panned down, and you see his foot facing the wrong way, and you see the jutting of the bone, and that's when you know. And at that point in time, you don't care about basketball. You don't care what the score is. You don't care about the game, and all you're hoping is, please God, let him be okay.
Right, and then the crazy thing too is, after all that, it's still they're literally in double overtime at this point, and it's,
with 2.5 minutes left.
Yeah, and it's winning time. It's a very close game. It's still one of those things, and it's neither team has any sort of opportunity to sort of try to shake it off. Like when Gordon Hayward went down a year ago, I mean, that was so early in the game. Like, you could see it in the first 5 minutes. Like, everybody on both teams was pretty tentative playing basketball, and then then they kind of got going. Whereas in this case, like, no, game's going to be over in 2 minutes.
And you're gassed because you're in double overtime.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you're just kind of in a tough situation. Blazers pulled that one out. They went to Chicago today, beat Chicago. We're recording this on a Wednesday night. And
that wasn't the Chicago Bulls they played. That was the Windy City Bulls. that was Robin Lopez and 7-8 dudes they picked up off the street.
Yeah.
Rough.
I mean, I saw the injury report and I was like, oh, I'm not watching this game tonight.
Yeah, no, there were more players injured than there were active. Like it was literally that bad. It was like, oh god, this happened one other time. Interestingly enough, with the Blazers, so Blazers and Warriors in 2010. Mm-hmm. Don Nelson's, this is Steph's rookie year. They came with, I think, 8 active guys. 2 guys were ruled out before the game. Then Turioff ended up catching a nick in the game. So they literally played with 5 guys. Devin George fouled out of the game. And keep in mind, this is the last game of the regular season.
Right.
Blazers are resting Brandon Roy, LaMarcus Aldridge, Wes Matthews. Like, everybody's resting, right? And excuse me, Wes wasn't a part of that team yet. Never mind. That's because Brandon's still there. Anyways, they have to put Ronnie Turioff in the game injured to show that he can no longer continue. And Nelly is losing his mind with the refs on the sideline, right? So Turioff goes in, like, they resume play. He limps over to, I want to say it was, I think it was Steve Blake, and just like hacks him, looks at the ref, palms turned up, like, dude, I can barely walk and you're making me do this. So Devin George is fouled out and they bring Devin George back in and they're explaining the rules to the crowd. Like, how does a guy who fouled out get back in the game? And just the complete and utter mayhem is going on. The crazy thing about this is Steph Curry played the entire game, the last game of his rookie season, and dropped a 42-piece. I mean, this game literally had everything. So that was, I know it's a little bit off track, but that's like all I could think about heading into tonight's game. That was the most interesting storyline heading into tonight's game of the night that I was looking at.
It just brought back those memories for you, those old school, way back in the day memories.
Yes, and we have, the Blazers have Steph's brother Seth out there, so there's a lot of little tie-ins.
Which I'm glad you brought up Seth. Like, he's actually playing really well the past few games, shooting it really well. I mean, he's looking pretty good.
So when the Blazers acquired him in the offseason, a lot of people were like, hey, that's a real under-the-radar move. It's nice. And it's like, well, yeah, Seth's a nice pick-and-roll player. He's a good shooter, a good secondary option, a guy who can play off ball, play with the ball in his hands, all those things. But there's a reason why you got him for $2.5 million. He's been away from the NBA for a year. Like when we're talking about detrimental injuries, like, you don't know if Seth's going to come back and be an effective player. Like, he was out of basketball with a rebuilt leg. Oh, weird. This sounds vaguely familiar. But it took him a couple months to be, effective. And then he was kind of hit or miss some nights here or there. But over the last 2-3 weeks, he's been damn good. I think over the last 2 weeks, he's shooting something like 48% from 3.
Right.
Like he has been phenomenal, and it's not just the 3-point shooting. He's finishing at the rim. He's hitting mid-range shots. He's been effective on all levels, which has not necessarily been his hallmark of his career. He's mostly just been that spot up and out of the pick and roll shooter.
Right, and the big thing is this is when you want guys to kind of start to step up.
That peak, that winning time.
Right, and especially going into the playoffs, and kind of going back to the Nurkic injury though. What do you do when you're looking at the Blazers now and you've watched them every game this season? Who's got to step up on this team? Like, everybody has to step up to a degree, and kind of carry the load. There's no way to replace a guy like Nurk, who's, as you said, having the best season of his career, which, he was a huge piece. Even when CJ went down, he's a big reason why Blazers were still able to stay winning during that time, because you couldn't just leave it all on Dame. Who's got to step up? Who are you looking at going like, hey man, you got to pick it up right now? Dan, you there?
I am here. That was a little fat finger from me on my little clicker. Apologies. No, I was saying the one thing with Jusuf Nurkic is, and there's a lot of people, they overlook, because this is going to sound maybe a little off, but he's a 7 foot, 300-pound white dude in Portland. Nobody cares.
Right.
Like, I mean, realistically, like, when you're talking about the landscape of the NBA, like, what's great about him? He's not. I mean, he's got a little bit of panache. He's got a little bit of nastiness to him, but like, Portland's not the most talked about or marketable team. It's just not who they are. So I think people kind of underestimate his impact. So when you're underestimating his impact, you're also going to underestimate what it takes to replace him. If not for guys like Cat having monster years and Rudy Gobert being a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, you're talking about Jusuf Nurkic as a no doubt All-Star.
Right.
Like he's 16-10, effective shooter, playing behind paltry perimeter defense, but yet Portland's overall effective defense with him on the floor, his net rating was like plus 11. Like when he's off the floor, the team's minus 5. Like, I mean, you don't get bigger swings than that unless your name's like, LeBron.
Right.
Realistically, those kind of ratings changes from guys with 2,000 minutes, you don't get that unless you're a true star in this league. And Nurkic ticks all those boxes. So to replace his production alone, and we're not even talking about his attitude, his bravado, his size, his nastiness, all of the intangible stuff, you have to have a lot of guys step up. And now, thankfully, the Blazers pick up Cantor in the buyout market, which I don't think anybody really saw coming. When he was bought out and released by the Knicks, I think everybody had him pegged as going to Boston.
Right.
I had heard it was basically a done deal. So kudos to Neil Olshey for reaching out to an agent who I think the Blazers have 6 of his clients. So there's a direct tie in there.
So there's some history.
Yeah. So Cantor's got to step up, right? But we all know about Cantor's defense.
Right.
That's or lack thereof, whatever you want to call it. But it's just got to be this committee effort. And with CJ out, you have to double down on it. So even if Seth Curry, we're talking about being phenomenal over the last couple games, Seth's basically just covering up for CJ. So
right.
Now you've got to have this committee of Cantor, of Myers Leonard, of Zach Collins, Al Furkamino to an extent. Like you have to have your front court try to shore up an awful lot of production before you even get to the intangibles. And that's no small task, man, especially in this conference.
Well, I think one thing is you there's no way you can replace the intangibles. Like that's what makes Nurkic. And,
exactly.
and that's just something that's just a loss. You have to almost write that down as like, all right, that's a loss. I mean, they had a cool moment today before the team left the locker room. They kind of FaceTime Nurkic. They put him up on the TV.
Oh, did they put that up on TV? I didn't know that made it out.
I saw it on the. I didn't see the video. I just saw the story.
Cool.
I read the story.
I was actually going to bring that up. That's awesome. Yeah. That's the first time they've all got to talk to him because I believe it was Dame, Stotts, and Olshey were the only ones that could make it to the hospital before the surgery because they had to leave town the next morning.
Right.
So. Yeah, I mean, you can tell what it means to those guys.
Yeah, and all the quotes too. Cantor talking about how much of a inspiration it was, and Zach Collins, was like, hey, that was really awesome. Kind of gave him an extra lift. Now, granted, they didn't need it tonight with playing you, me, and Robin Lopez.
Exactly.
But the idea of it was pretty cool, and Coach Stotts had given credit to his wife, who said they should do that. But the idea of it is like, that's something that you can kind of, hopefully he'll be around a little bit. It's not the same as him on the court, obviously, and all that stuff. I don't know when he'll be hanging with the team or anything like that. It'll be a while, but the intangibles is something, like I said, you can't replace. But, you got to have guys like, it's Myers Leonard. This is the next up mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Myers Leonard had to have been staying ready and ready to go. Zach Collins, who's a guy who I think they're going to have to, he's going to have to really kind of step up and be the guy that we're all kind of hoping he could be at some point. And then I think there's going to be times where I think they're just going to have to go small, right? Like I know it's not great, it's not the best option, but it's just like at certain points it's going to be all you guys got.
Excuse me. Yeah, the thing is I'm not against it. But because Portland is such a small team, the idea of bringing in Cantor was so they could continue to be big in the places that they are big. So when everybody's zigging, Portland zagged. They don't have the wing core necessary. So what they did in bringing in Cantor was they doubled down on 7-foot, 300-pound dudes, right?
Right.
So they're like, hey, listen, we're not going to be able to hang with Paul George. That's not something we can do. We can't hang with the premier wings in the league. But what we can do is we can give you 48 minutes of just kicking your ass in the paint. And so that two-tiered, two-pronged approach of, okay, if Nurkic isn't out there, Kanter's out there. If Kanter's not out there, Nurkic is out there. Like, you just wear an opponent's front line down, right? When you take the bigger piece of that guy and Nurkic out of that, all of a sudden you're like, well, we're not really prepared to go small, and we can't really go big the whole time anymore. So they're back in this world that they were in 2 years ago. Now they've got a little bit of help because they're better off in the backcourt because they have, well, when CJ's healthy,
right?
They have a Seth Curry, they have a Rodney Hood. The emergence of Jake Layman as being a guy who can be an energy guy. Mo Harkless being a contributor after being kind of MIA for most of the season. Like, those are all the tertiary things that you're hoping to lift up the boat when you have a healthy Nurkic. Now you have to count on those guys in situations where they haven't delivered in the past. I mean, do I need to bring up the Pelican series?
No,
I don't like that one.
I'd like to keep Blazers fans still listening beyond where we're at now, so we're not going to bring up the Pelican series, but I think that you are in a little bit better position than you were 2 years ago to go small. It's not ideal, but I think it's something that you guys, you're going to be forced to have to do it for at least a few minutes a game, because at certain points, like you said, you just can't go big all game. You just don't have the horses for it anymore.
No, the only time it would make sense is if they got matched up with OKC or Utah,
right,
where you've got true bigs out there. Like, then you can go extended minutes with Kanter, extended minutes with Myers, because those are both. People talk. It's kind of funny when you talk about big in the NBA. There's big, like, there's big dudes, and then there's, holy crap, Jusuf Nurkic, Joel Embiid, Andre Drummond, Myers Leonard,
right,
big, like Rudy Gobert. Like, those guys are the giants among giants. And there's a few teams Portland can do that with. But, a team goes small like Houston, yeah, then you kind of find yourself in a little bit of trouble, because when Portland goes small, they go dumb small. They go Dame, CJ, Seth Curry.
Right. And
they got 3 6-foot to 6'3" dudes, and you're just like, this is not going to last very long.
Well, it's funny. I almost think, like, other teams don't go small; they just kind of get longer. And it's. I mean, you look at it with the Warriors for that matter. Like, they're still big. They're still tall guys. They're still, Steph would be the smallest one at 6'3". In their death lineup. It's all these teams that tend to have like their small lineup is actually really their long lineup. It's their quick lineup. But unfortunately for you guys, your small lineup is your small lineup.
Yeah, it's a small, quick lineup. I mean, it's your free throw lineup. I mean, when they go quote unquote small and they play, the smallest they ever get really is they allowing Aminu to play the 5. So you've got the generously listed 6'3" Damian Lillard, which is really slightly above 6 foot. The 6'2.5" CJ McCollum, the 6'1", 6'2" Seth Curry, and then it's take your pick of Mo Harkless, Rodney Hood, Jake Layman. They can go a little bit bigger and go Aminu Collins at the 5, but Collins has not shown that he can be that guy, and I think that probably goes with where you're going to go here later. But the options at that forward stretch kind of position haven't been good for Portland and those guys that are 6'7" to 6'10" range, right?
Right. And that's been the biggest, and that's the biggest challenge of trying to somewhat fill that hole that Nurkic has left. So we've kind of danced around this one a little bit. What's the prognosis on CJ? I know he's not with them on this road trip, he's not with them on this road trip from what I understand.
He's not going to travel with them this trip because it's such a unique injury, popliteus strain. The only other documented case of this is KG in 2009. They're going to play it by ear, and realistically, with Nurkic out, there is literally zero reason to bring him back. Like, if he's not ready to go for the playoffs, I don't think you try to play him at 80%. Because this sounds awful, especially coming from the guy that's on TV talking about the team. Mentally, you're packaging this team away from an executive standpoint. Right. Now, the players, they can't do that. But if you're running this team, you're not planning on first round series victories. You'll take it like if they get matched up with, I know the Clippers are your team and everything, but I think if you get matched up with the Clippers,
no team's my team.
I'm just saying, I know you got a little bit of attachment.
Yeah. Listen, Danny, I'm going to tell you something here. Doc fired me. There ain't any attachment. I'm happy for them. I'm happy they're playing well. I've enjoyed this team better than more than most. But it's not like I have an attachment to it. And my friends in my basketball group chat can attest to that. So don't worry about that part with me. But continue.
Well, then perfect, because I mean, there's no love lost between Terry Stotts and Doc Rivers.
No.
So I mean, if you're gonna have a matchup that's gonna be there, I mean, that's realistically one, because while Harrell is an Energizer bunny, I don't have an issue with Cantor playing underneath every pick and roll with him, because he's not a threat on anything other than rim running.
Right.
So I mean, that like matchup wise, where the bigs you could find yourself in trouble, the Clippers don't present like this Rubik's Cube with, 3 additional sides. There's a pattern, a rhyme, and a reason to taking them down.
Yeah. And I think that's probably who you'd want to play the most. But unfortunately, I think that's the one that every team really kind of wants to play right now in the play.
Well, I think that's true, but I also think people are looking at Portland now and knowing that there's no defense behind them, and the other teams are all much more equipped to take advantage of that. Like a Portland-Denver matchup right now is hell. Like Enes Kanter trying to guard Jokic 18 feet away, hard pass.
Oh, I mean, I was being nice and not including you on that list because you're the guest.
No, I mean, no. Listen, man, I am I will always be the realest guy around when it comes to talking about these Blazers. I was talking myself into a second round run with a healthy Nurkic, with in the right matchup, they could get to the Western Conference Finals if somebody knocked off the Warriors.
Right.
Like that was the path that I had kind of talked myself into. Without Nurkic, if they get a game on anybody outside the Clippers, I'll be impressed.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this question, because this is something that you kind of talked about. Like, you're, as a executive, you kind of have to start looking towards the next season.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, Nurk's going to be out for most of next season.
Like, if he is back to basketball activities by Christmas, I will be impressed. I don't expect to see him in a game until the next calendar year. Yeah,
I mean, it's going to be a while. So at minimum, he's out 2.5 months, right? So what can they do? Like, what are you looking at in terms of the off season that you feel like there's stuff out there that it's like, like I look at it and I'm just like, man, this is such an impossible spot to be in. What?
So, excuse me, there's a couple things about this that make the situation extra crappy, depending on how you assess the whole situation. First of all, I'm probably one of the earliest adopters of I don't think the Dame CJ backcourt's going to work. So with that in mind, I've used the trade machine more than anybody for every CJ McCollum deal you could ever imagine over the past 3 years. And it's not because I don't like CJ. I think CJ's a good player, and I think if you put CJ on another team and gave him the reins like they've given Damian Lillard, statistically his output would look very similar. I think he put up 25, 5, and 4 pretty effectively. But while they play well off each other, they don't maximize each other's potential. So with that in mind, that's always been something that's a butt up against my head with how you build this team. Well, Jusuf Nurkic covered up a lot of the warts there. He allowed the pick and roll to be run from either side, short roll, hard roll, just the different styles of attack on the offensive end alone. And then defensively, he covered those two up. So now you're going into the offseason where Damian Lillard is going to be eligible for a Supermax because he's going to make All-NBA. Otherwise, I'm going to start strangling voters. I mean, what he's done with his team over the last few years has been insane. I don't care if it's bias or not. You don't put up 27, 6 and 5 over 3 straight years and make the playoffs when everybody picks you to not make it year after year after year. Like, even I don't buy into the whole chip on your shoulder stuff very often, but there comes a point where you just got to give the guy his due.
Right.
But I mean, you look at this team and now you don't know. You have to punt a year because you're capped out. You have all the money in the world tied up in Dame and CJ. You've got Aminu, who's going to be a free agent. You can't retain Cantor or Hood or Curry. You don't have any of their bird rights.
Right.
Aminu's a free agent. You've got $40 million in expiring money tied up in Myers Leonard, Evan Turner, and Mo Harkless. And you have 3 guys under rookie deals. One is an active part of your rotation in Zach Collins. Gary Trent Jr. and Anthony Simons are blowout minute guys. You have a million things going against you, and your franchise cornerstone, and in my opinion, the second most valuable player on this team, in Jusuf Nurkic, is gone for probably 12 months. So what the hell do you do this summer? Are you backing yourself into a corner and blowing it up and trading CJ McCollum? Probably not, because you've resisted that urge over the last 3 years when you're building towards something.
Right.
Now that you're punting on a season, now you're going to get rid of him? Like, how do you do that? But here's the thing. I mean, you've got $12 million of sunk cost into a guy who's going to be out for a year. How do you compensate for that?
I mean, even when he comes back, too, it's not like, okay.
It's going to take another year to be good on top of that.
Right. It just takes a while to really kind of – we're seeing it with Hayward, right? Like, it just takes such a long time to get back. You know, there's a mental aspect to it. There's the physical stuff of just you're getting your body back right because, you know, in that recovery time, you know, you're
not playing hoop.
Well, I mean, but it's not even that. Like, the human body's kind of amazing. Like, when you hurt, you know, your leg and your right leg, your left leg begins to kind of overcompensate and just sort of does it on its own and stuff like that. And that kind of can
the
lead,
imbalances that cause.
Yeah, and then can kind of lead to other injuries or other things kind of happening and strains and whatnot. It just takes a while to get everything back in line back into that working order. So I just think, you know, it's a year plus in that regard. And I honestly don't know what they do. You know, like you said, it'd be weird to trade CJ now because, you know, you need at least CJ and Dame to stay in the race. At least, you know, maybe next year the whole landscape might be different depending how free agency shakes out with KD and everything. And if KD leaves the Warriors and heads east,
we all know where he's going.
Well, if he goes to the Knicks like everybody thinks, you know, then it's that, you know. But then there's the questions of, do the Clippers get Kawhi? You know, do the Lakers get somebody, or how do the Lakers improve? It's a whole, you know, the whole landscape of what the West can look like is going to be. It could be a less competitive West. I don't think it will be, just because there's so many good teams already. But it'll be interesting. But they could at least stay in that race if they keep them. But I am curious though, what has been your favorite CJ trade that you've cooked up in the trade machine?
Okay, so people are going to be like, "Oh, you're just revisionist history of this," but you can search my Twitter account. There's receipts, folks. I was 3 years ago? I was like, you know who's a guy I really can get behind? Chris Middleton. I'd like to see CJ traded out. And then Brogdon came along, and there was this whole thing about the Bucks not really being invested in Brogdon. I'm like, man, I could really talk myself into CJ, and you know, see maybe if it takes CJ and a pick to get, you know, Middleton and Brogdon. Right. People were like, "That no, you're giving up way too much." And then it quickly turned into, "There's no way in hell the Bucks will do that." You know, 2 years later. Oladipo was a guy I wanted to see him moved for. I thought the athletic profile and the better defensive profile. Obviously, he's not the shooter that CJ is, but I thought that would balance out what the Blazers needed more. A lot of the times, the guys that I've been looking at and the guys that I've built these deals around have been around guys who were younger, a little more athletic, not necessarily the shooter that he is, but that have like maybe one more gear left in them. So the guy that I've talked myself into this year is Aaron Gordon.
Okay.
I know some people are like, well, you know, CJ's a better player than him, but I'm like, you know, yeah, right now, but you're taking a risk on somebody with good potential, who's got a baseline that's going to maintain, you know, what you're looking for, but with that possible chance for a swing. And the big thing here is that, or at least in this particular scenario, is that the Blazers get that salary cap relief. You get off a guy who's percentage-wise making max money because of how his deal was structured.
Right.
But he's not a max guy. And that's not a slight at CJ. That's just how the CBA goes, right? You can't. And this is where the teams that are the best for a reason. The reason the Warriors are who they are, yes, they drafted well and they got lucky, but they got guys at contracts far, far below what their value is. Portland only has 3 of those guys, and one of them's lost for a year now. The other one's Damian Lillard, and the other one's Zach Collins, and that's because he's performing on a rookie deal. So they have a lot of guys that are out of place with what their contracts are, and I don't begrudge a single one of these guys for taking the money. Neil Olshey calls me up and offers me $17 million a year to hoop, and I'm Evan Turner, I take the bag.
Oh, no brainer. I mean, that's not a conversation.
Right? So,
right.
I mean, so everybody's like, well, Evan Turner makes too much money. No, man, your boss just didn't offer you money. Quit being jealous. But so they're in this just awful financial situation. Right now, I think they're the 4th highest payroll in the league. Next year, I think they only have like 6 guys under contract, and they're like the 8th highest payroll.
Right.
With half a roster. That's a really crappy spot to be in, man.
So let me ask you this question. I have 2 more questions, and then I'll let you go rest into the evening. What's your take on the Neil Olshey run so far in Portland? It's been what, 5, 6 years, 7 years?
Yes, 7 years, because him and Stotts came as a package deal,
right.
Or he hired Stotts. And this is Terry's 7th year. I will start by giving Neil his credit. He's done very, very good at the Walmart bargain bin basement shopping level of the NBA. There may not be anybody better than him. Finding Mo Harkless for a top 55 protected pick from the Orlando Magic, very good deal. Al Frucamino, you pick him up as a free agent off the pile in Dallas. You sign him for $6.5 million a year. Good deal. You draft CJ McCollum. You draft Damian Lillard. You make a move. Well, you weren't trading for Jusuf Nurkic. You were trying to get a first-round pick because you had to move off Mason Plumlee because of things that you mistakenly did, but you got Jusuf Nurkic in the long run. So he's been very good drafting. He's been very good with the flyers and taking chances on guys and developing them. Second-round picks like Alan Crabb and Pat Connaughton and Jake Layman. Like, find me a team that's had more successful – Will Barton. Find me a team that has hit on more second-round picks in the last 10 years than the Portland Trailblazers. Or the last 7 years. You won't. They've been phenomenal. It's ridiculous. Now, the criticisms, and they're heavy. I'll just say 2016. That year will go down as a year that will not necessarily ring in infamy, but that severely handicap their chances going forward. They handed out $17 million a year to Alan Crabb, $17 million a year to Evan Turner, 10 plus to Myers Leonard, 10 plus to Maurice Harkless. That is a metric crap load of money.
Right.
And then you move Alan Crabb for Andrew Nicholson's expiring deal. And you got the dead cap of Festus Ezeli, who never played a single game for the Trailblazers and caused a stink and had some of the Blazers' locker room up in arms. So free agency, not good. Real bad. In fact, some of the worst in the NBA. Like, I mean, we're not talking Billy King bad, but I mean, it got Mitch Kupchak fired.
Yeah, well, the not a lot is Billy King bad, and Mitch Kupchak had a very short run with once Jim Buss started taking over. You knew it was him and Jim wasn't going to last very long.
So I mean, there have been some good, there have been some very bad. I think that's probably the story of Neil Olshey. If you want to give him another good, he did bring in Terry Stotts, and also ran coach, who has been, I think he's second now in wins for the Trailblazers. Mm-hmm. So you could say it was pretty successful hire.
About the one thing I don't think Neil gets a lot of credit for, and listen, I'm a little bit biased because Neil's the guy that hired me with the Clippers. Like, he brought me in. I don't get my NBA career if it wasn't for him. But I would say the one thing I don't think he gets a lot of credit for with the Blazers is, he really has kind of established, though, a bit of a culture.
That is absolutely true.
And he makes it a point of he wants to bring in players that want to be there. Now, granted, some of it's because they're getting quite the bag that they're not going to get elsewhere. But he does want to bring in guys. His hope is guys whose attitude is, I want to be there. I want to be there every day. From my understanding, Dame works out there in the off season. I think
most of these guys are here.
Yeah, and they're there all year and things like that, and that's something that he kind of wanted to create, and I think has been fairly successful in doing that. Now it's not just all him, right? It's Stott's doing it. You pick up a great guy in terms of leadership than Dame, and I mean I don't know if there's anybody better really right now in terms of a leader.
Pure leadership.
Yeah,
he's top 3 in the league, and if you don't know that, I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying if you're listening to this in general and you don't know that Damian Lillard is a top 3, top 1 leader in this league, you are missing the big picture.
Well, I just think I think we're seeing what it looks like when you have a person who thinks he's a good leader in Boston and Kyrie, and they're often compared, right? And then you have a guy who's actually a legitimate leader in Portland. You're kind of seeing all that.
Outside of the Lillard LaMarcus kind of made up scuffle, snafu, whatever you want to say, it being poorly executed, you have not heard a bad thing out of a Portland locker room in Damian Lillard's entire career.
And I don't think, and to be honest, I don't even think that's really on.
It wasn't a real thing.
I don't think it was real, but even if it was, like, I don't even really feel like a lot of that was on him.
No.
I don't feel like, I mean, granted too, he was still relatively a young player in the league when all that was going on and just kind of finding his way in the NBA. And so it's not like I felt like Dame was at any point did anything wrong in that situation, or if anybody did for that matter. But I just think, I just think his leadership is something that nobody else has in the NBA. And I think that's kind of another thing. And I think a lot of that starts with, what Neil and Coach Stotts kind of built there together when they came in and in that executing that vision. And then, Dame just kind of, them kind of lucking into a guy as great a leader as Dame. So I think with all that sort of in line, it's, I just don't think Neil gets enough credit for that.
No, and that's part of that is understanding the market here, because listen, it's not a secret that a sport that's dominated by mostly African American men don't want to come hang out in a city that's 90% white in Portland.
Right.
Like that's a real culture thing. That for anybody getting offended by that, that's Portland. It's like one of the whitest major cities in the country.
Although I heard they have great artisan bread.
They do. They do have fantastic bread here. But there's a lot of things that culturally you may not have here that you're used to coming from, basketball dominated regions in the country. It's a fantastic fan base that is probably more dedicated than damn near any other market. But culturally, if you're used to things that come out of a different community, it's about as white bread as you get here when you talk about artisan bread. I mean, so that's a thing. Like, to get guys, the free agency has always been in Portland. You have to play a Portland premium because you're geographically isolated. You're not culturally diverse, and you're kind of in the middle of an NBA hellscape. Like, you're the furthest north team in the league, basically. So it's kind of for people wondering, it is further north than Toronto.
Yep.
We the real north. Yep. That's off.
Oh, wow. Wow. I'm not. Listen, that was Danny who said that, not me. All right. If anybody wants to go at anybody, go at Danny. Get into Danny's mentions. I had nothing to do with that one there. I do want to ask. This is kind of my last question. It's sort of or actually, before we go to that, I do want to applaud your fans because you mentioned how great the fans were. I thought it was amazing that when Nurkic was down, that they just started chanting his name. I thought that was... It
made me cry.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I thought that was pretty cool and good on the fans for that.
They actually just got a billboard. The GoFundMe project went up yesterday or this morning. And tonight they had $8,000 and they have a billboard saying "Get well soon, Yuka" going up right next to Moda Center. That's all crowdsourced.
That's awesome.
So I mean, you want to talk about supporting their guys? There you go.
That's great, and that's amazing, and this kind of leads a little bit to my next question. What's the latest on the ownership situation? Unfortunately, Paul Allen passed away. And now it's kind of curious in terms of what's going to happen to the to the Blazers. Are you hearing any rumblings? I know his sister's kind of taken over, but is this something that she's going to do long term, or what's? I got to imagine it's just making everybody a little bit uneasy in Portland.
Yeah, so you go from having probably the strongest owner in the league. I mean, when Paul Allen walked into CBA meetings or owner meetings, Paul Allen ran them. He was the preeminent owner. He was one of the longest tenured owners, and outside of Steve Ballmer, he had more bag than anybody else. Like, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason about how much money he's gonna, commit to his team. So you didn't just lose the richest owner in sports, or one of the richest owners in sports, or one of the longest tenured. You lost somebody who had a lot of pull around the league. When he spoke, David Stern listened. So if it gives you any idea of where the kind of power Paul Allen had in the league, there you go. Not only that, he was incredibly well loved and respected here in Portland. He showed year after year after year that he was committed to putting a winning product on the floor. This is not James Dolan, right? And I'm not just saying that just to take shots at Dolan. Paul Allen loved this team. When he passed away, there was a lot of us that were kind of at a loss for words, because it's an uneasy and unsteady feeling not knowing what's going to happen to the team. So Jody Allen, his sister, has taken over running the team through a trust, Vulcan Inc. And no, I'm not joking. That's the name of the company. That's the business side of Paul Allen's ventures. They are running the day-to-day operations for the Blazers. His sister is running it through a trust. But the thing is, part of his will stated that if the Seahawks or the Blazers were sold, all of the proceeds would go to charity, go to the Paul Allen Foundation. So they're kind of sorting through the legalese of everything here, right?
Right.
And doing their due diligence as they should, because if she is entitled to some of the money from the sale, if they decide to sell a team, they want to know, right? Like, I don't mind somebody's team of lawyers taking a look at that when that's like their job in life. I had heard that prior to Paul Allen's passing, that there was a succession plan in place and there was a group that was interested in buying the Blazers. As far as moving the team or anything, that's 1,000% off the table. It would take somebody, literally spending $2 billion to buy the team and probably another $2 billion to move it. So I mean, that's the kind of importance they've placed on having a team here in the Northwest with the Sonics gone. So as far as who it is or what the timeline looks like, I don't know.
Let me ask you this question then, in terms of what if they moved it to Seattle?
They can't do it.
That's just not good. Okay.
Yeah, I've talked to people around the league who would be in a position to speak on it, and I've been told that it's a non-starter because of how fixated the team is. And as much as the NBA would love to have a franchise back in Seattle, it would not come at the cost of the Portland Trail Blazers.
Good. That's kind of one of the more important things. I would hate to see the team move. Again, we just talked about how great the fans are. I've never been. I have a buddy who's a diehard fan, and he was talking.
We gotta get you up here, man.
Well, yeah. No, I've been to Portland. I've been
to a game.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story. That's a far ways away. But he was there recently and caught a game at the Spirit of 73.
Spirit of 77.
77, sorry, 77.
No, it's the bar right next door.
Yeah, and God, I want to say it was. Did you guys, when you guys beat the Warriors in Golden State, that happened this year?
Yep.
And he was just talking about how nuts the bar was going and stuff. So it's like
that place is shoulder to shoulder every game.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to, just for that sake, I didn't want I just didn't want to hear anything of Portland might move or anything like that. So
no. I've heard the complete opposite, that they're fully committed to the franchise here. I mean, when Nurkic went down, this city collectively held their breath all night long. The local radio guy for the Blazers was on air until 3:00 in the morning taking phone calls. On our post-game show, we ditched all of our commercial and sponsored elements, and we basically kind of had like a time of mourning. Like if you took the Blazers away from this team, this city would die.
Right. So we definitely don't want that. And I know at the beginning we had said we were going to talk about whatever other random NBA stuff came along, but we're 50 minutes deep, and I don't want to take too much more of your time. So, Danny, man, I had a good time. We're going to have you on to talk about something other than Portland.
Yeah, no, you get me talking Blazers, man, and it goes literally all night. I mean, I'm at the point where I literally do it for a living. So you got to shut me up.
I love it. I love it. But tell everybody where they could find you on Twitter and where they can find the Blazers Edge podcast. And let you go, man.
All right, sounds good. You can find me on social media everywhere across all platforms at @dmarang, at DMARANG. If you're catching the game on League Pass, pre- and post-game show on NBC Sports Northwest, Blazers Outsiders with my friends and co-hosts Shane Brennan and Joe Simons at blazersedge.com. I host a weekly podcast there with my co-host Terabo and Biggs. Got a couple of features that I write there weekly. Reach out to me on Twitter. My DMs are open. If you ever have, in particular, any Blazers-related questions, comments, concerns, whatever, you just want to shoot it, hit me up anytime.
And just remember that, Raptors. Remember his social media stuff when he was
at D Marang. Come at me.
That was him who made the comments. I had nothing to do with it. Danny, man, thank you so much, man.
Hey, appreciate you having me, Mo.
Oh, my pleasure, man. And that's it for our show. Be sure to rate us, like us, leave reviews on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever else you go to listen to your podcast. Please, guys, take a second and rate and review the podcast. It goes a long way. I should have said that at the beginning of the podcast. Unfortunately, I didn't. I'm sure most of you have already tuned out by now. Anyways, have a good week.